Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's so great that you joined us today. My name is Greg Olsen. I'm the director of the New York State Office for Aging. Really excited specifically about this program for a number of different reasons. But I have today with me two of my really good friends and partners. We've been doing this work for a very, very long time. Today, we want to focus a little bit on Alzheimer's disease. I have with me today Beth Smith-Boivin, who is the executive director of the Alzheimer's Association of Northeastern New York, and that's in the Capital District area, and Cathy James, who's the CEO of the Alzheimer's Association in Central New York and covers a big chunk of the middle of the state. So welcome, both of you. So just let me provide a little bit of context, because I think that this is important. What we've tried to do in doing these Facebook Lives is bring issues and education to folks on things that we know in the work that we do, but also to try to tackle topics that are hard to talk about, or that people don't want to talk about, or that they're afraid of. And this is certainly one of them. And it's something that we need to talk about, frankly. We've also talked for the last year about the variety of programs and services that the New York State Office for the Aging administers, our counties and our partners deliver, of which the Alzheimer's Associations are a part of that. Not only for persons with dementia, but for their caregivers. And these could be anything from services in the home, help with bathing and dressing and shopping and preparing meals. We have the largest nutrition program in the country. We provide a variety of respite and caregiver supports. Respite is giving an individual a break so that they can do other things while in a safe environment for the loved one that they're caring for. Providing transportation, social adult day services, and many, many more. As I mentioned, we do work very closely with all of the Alzheimer's chapters throughout New York State. And that's important because there's so much work to go around. There should never be a turf issue on anything aging associated, because we need every single asset that we have at the community level, at the regional level, at the state level to meet the needs of older adults. You know, today is about facts and not fear. People are afraid of dementia. People are afraid of Alzheimer's disease. We've seen it in our families. We see pictures of it. We see things on the nightly news about Alzheimer's disease. And again, people are often in denial. They don't want to know if I potentially might have it or I might not, what the testing and diagnosis looks like. But, you know, folks, the bottom line is being in denial does not change the course or trajectory of this disease. And it's not always doom and gloom. And we're going to learn about that today. You can make an impact by early diagnosis and getting involved in some of the studies and treatments to try to further this along so that we can maybe tackle this one day and cure it. So as with COVID, there's been a huge impact on persons with dementia and their caregivers. Just a couple of facts and figures. CDC released a report in September of 2020 that 30% of caregivers contemplated suicide last year, as opposed to 6% of the general population. 35% were utilizing alcohol and drugs to cope, versus 7% of the general population. 50% were using food to cope, affecting, again, their health, diabetes, other types of things. So there's always a huge impact on COVID on everything that we do, and we're going to talk about that today. So we have the experts. I am not the expert in Alzheimer's disease. I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know, and that's why we bring the people to you that do know and can kind of walk it through. So Beth, Cathy, thank you so much for joining me. And let's just jump in, right? There is a general misunderstanding that there's one type of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or, people have heard Parkinson's disease, but that's not true at all. There's a continuum of cognitive decline. Walk us through what some of those definitions are.
Yeah. You want me to get started, Kath?
Certainly, Beth. Thanks.
Okay, terrific. So you're absolutely right, Greg. And to your point, oftentimes people think that the title or the label of dementia is the diagnosis in and of itself, which isn't true either. So what we know is that individuals who reach full adulthood have reached their full cognitive capacity, which means we have about 100 billion nerve cells, all of which have very important jobs. And when we talk about people aging normally, or as many people in the community refer to it, the neighbor that's as sharp as a tack, that's what we all strive for and what we all want to achieve. Regrettably, though, many of us will face this course of developing cognitive decline that is not what we consider normal aging. And when that happens, we enter the first stage, which is called mild cognitive impairment. And that's where the individual who's impacted themselves notices a change in their memory. And most specifically, that change in memory is for new events. And the reason for that is because the damage with any and all of these diseases typically happens in that part of the brain, the hippocampus, that makes and stores new memory. And so we look very carefully at this population of folks that has mild cognitive impairment, because we know that approximately 70% of them will move on to develop some sort of dementia. And so we want to understand why. But furthermore, we have about 30% of that population that will never advance. They will remain in this area of mild cognitive impairment. And so what is neuroprotective in that population is equally interesting to all of us. And so what I would say about dementia is that it is not the disease in and of itself. When mild cognitive impairment advances and we notice that there are impairments in more than just memory, so it may be movement changes, it may be changes in one's ability to drive to familiar places without getting lost. It may be difficulty with retrieving words or making words. And it may be changes in personality and behavior. But when one more thing, in addition to memory, is impaired, we identify an individual as having dementia. And then, believe it or not, there are as many as 70 different reasons for having dementia. So it could be a Parkinson's type dementia. It could be a vascular dementia associated with stroke or a series of strokes. But most commonly, and far and away most commonly, the leading type of dementia is dementia of the Alzheimer's type. And it is critical, Greg, that we move families past this idea that simply accepting the term dementia as the diagnosis is okay. We would never walk into a doctor's office and have them suggest that a loved one has cancer and walk away without more answers. And we want people to understand that they need to do exactly the same thing with dementia. It is the only way that we will advance knowledge and treatments and ultimately a cure for these many diseases. And this impacts many, many people, and Cathy can speak more to that.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and Cathy, just let me ask you, and I'm sorry to interrupt, because Beth raised a lot of important issues that, like, it's not a one and done. There's so many different things. So where's the root of the denial come in? Is it just because of how dementia or Alzheimer's is portrayed to us in the media, that there's just this unbelievable fear of getting to the bottom of it? And I agree with Beth's sentiment, whether it be cancer or something else. Something is going on and you're going to go get yourself checked out and you're going to accept that. And there's going to be a course path, right? Where this is a little bit different, where, there's a lot of reasons why we can put it off to another day, right? So what in your experience is the root cause of the denial? Is that the fear that we've been, kind of embedded in us over the course of all these years?
Well, I think there's several things at play with this, Greg. I think some of it is fear. Right now, we don't have a means of being able to cure this disease. So, so that is a fear. There's stigma around Alzheimer's disease that we've been working very, very hard to make sure that these conversations are taking place. And there was a study that was done by the Alzheimer's Association that looked at what these conversations consist of, and are people having conversations? And what we found was that patients are not having the conversation with their doctor that either they themselves are seeing changes in their cognitive abilities, or that someone has reported that to them. And the doctors are not having those conversations with their patients. They're apprehensive about bringing up, are you having concerns about your memory? Has someone else mentioned that? Or perhaps there's been a family member that has mentioned that to the doctor prior to the appointment. So, that's one of the areas that the association's been working very hard in making sure that both sides are understand what the nuances, as Beth had mentioned. There's also other things at play. We mentioned about there's 70 different causes for things such as dementia. There are things that can be treated in reverse. So it's very important that when a family member, an individual, is noticing these changes, that they do have these conversations with their primary care physician so that we can determine what is happening, what is going on, and if it is something that could be treated and reversed, or if it is Alzheimer's disease, that the importance of early detection is vital in the treatment. What treatment we do have can help with the symptoms and can help with quality of life. And if we can get people on what treatment we have currently, that helps them with access to things like legal and financial planning, so that they can be planning out what their long-term plans are. But just as importantly, access to clinical trials. And there's lots of hope that's on the horizon for treatment and clinical trials that would give access to individuals with the disease to be able to participate in. So these are conversations that, even from a family perspective, it's difficult to have those conversations with my parents and asking them, or noticing that maybe they're having difficulty driving or paying the bills, or that I'm noticing that things are slipping when I'm visiting my mother. So those are very common concerns, and we have some great resources on our website at alz.org on how to have those conversations. Those sometimes are not natural to us in having those conversations, and so we have some good starting points of how to bridge that.
Yeah, and why this is so valuable, right? 70 different reasons for some type of cognitive decline. You said two words, both of you did, that I want to highlight. Some are reversible because there's 70 different things, and that there's hope on the horizon. And that's the whole reason why we're doing this today. I didn't mean to cut you off, Beth, before I cue up the video, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add to what Cathy said. Fear and stigma are such important elements in terms of being a rate-limiting step in getting people that early diagnosis. But one other thing that we so often hear from families is that they noticed this for about 2 years or so, but they just figured it was aging. Parents were getting older, and so they ignored it. And I think if we do one thing today, and that is to raise people's awareness about these changes not being a normal part of aging, that we will have done a great service today.
I think that is so important, right? The myth about what's normal and what's not normal. And I don't know if my dad's going to be mad that I mentioned this. I didn't plan on it, but my dad is going through this right now. And he's done everything right, meaning your advice as we go through the day. He has gone and gotten the test. He is involved in a trial. I noticed some of the memory decline. He's very, very functional. It bothers him that this is happening. He notices it, but he's not putting his head in the sand and thinking, well, this is the end of the rope, that there's intervention. So what type of issue are we talking about? Let's cue up this video that Cathy provided for us, just to put a little context behind this. And while we're waiting, this is my puppy Henry that is in the background here. Kelly,
Greg,
can you cue up that video for us?
I want to, Greg, take a minute while she's doing that to tip my hat to your dad, because it's people like he that change the state of disease for all of us.
So while we're waiting, what do you mean by that? And I know we're going to get to that later, but while we're killing time waiting for the video.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is when we think about major breakthroughs that have happened in disease states, we look at the treatments for things like breast cancer and HIV/AIDS. Those things happened because people enrolled in clinical trials. They decided that not only could they do something that might help themselves, but they were doing something that would help future generations and the rest of us. And it takes a lot of time in some circumstances to participate in these trials, but boy, are you giving a gift to so many others in doing so.
I agree.
All right.
I'm really proud of them for doing that, because it's easy to not want to know.
Mhm.
You know, I'm from the school where I want to know. I want to know what I'm dealing with. I want to know, you know, am I one of the 70, or, you know, are there medications that can slow it down? Yes. Are there new and innovative trials that could potentially get us a lot further along? Yes. These are the things we don't know about, which is why we're here. So we're having a problem with the video, so I'm going to move
Nope, I got it,
into
Greg.
the next- Oh, thank you, Kelly.
Hold on 2 seconds.
So I like that, not only because it's short, but there's a lot to unpack right there. You know, look, we're a country of 300 and almost 40 million. You've got 6 million or so with Alzheimer's disease. So it's not nearly as prevalent as everybody thinks. You just, again, you go back to the normal process of aging. You don't turn 75 and then boom, you all of a sudden have Alzheimer's disease. So, you know, I think the messaging that we collectively need to get out is what is normal and what's not normal. We need to engage the clinical providers to be able to have the conversation and give the confidence to individuals and families to be able to raise these types of things as well. But a couple of things I want to ask you, and it's a kind of a 2-series question, and we started to talk about this before we launched into that video, is the importance of early detection, accurate diagnosis, which then can lead to planning, treatment, research trial opportunities. Easy for me to say, yeah, go out there and get tested. Well, how does that happen? I mean, that's why you guys are here. This is why you're so important. And I thank you, your staff, your volunteers, all of the collective Alzheimer's Association, not only in New York, but really the national effort behind this campaign. So what do people do?
So I wish that I could tell you that it was as simple as being diagnosed for something like diabetes, where we could take a drop of blood and measure glucose levels and make a pretty early and accurate diagnosis quite promptly. In the field of Alzheimer's disease, we are not quite there yet, although there is a very exciting blood test on the horizon. So that's wonderful news. We do have 2 tests for Alzheimer's disease that are single conclusive tests. One is a PET scan with amyloid dye infusion, and the other is an analysis of cerebral spinal fluid, which requires a spinal tap. And so both of those are either expensive or inaccessible or invasive. And so obviously our goal is to find a single biomarker test that is not any of those things. So as a result of that particular circumstance, what we do is to continue to sort of look at the whole picture of what might be causing someone to have this syndrome of dementia, and then do a series of tests that helps us rule out things that we can see with a single scan, and then make a final analysis. So it's a bit of a comprehensive process. It begins with some type of an image, which again will not singularly diagnose Alzheimer's disease, but it will rule out brain tumors or stroke or hydrocephalus, any of those possible contributing factors or causes of dementia. And then we do some blood work to rule out Huntington's disease, vitamin B12 deficiencies, Pick's disease, and other motor neuron problems. And then ultimately we do a series of what we call paper pencil or neuropsychological tests to test the various functions of the brain. So in other words, that early memory ability we can test by asking people for a variety of words and then asking them to repeat those back in 5 minutes. We can test the function of the temporal lobe, which makes language, by asking a series of questions related to language and asking people to write a sentence. And so those tests provide us with a great deal of information. When we put the whole package together, the scan, the blood work, the exam, and the testing, and we add to that the critical information that families provide us with about their observations, that's the best way for us to make that diagnosis. And when we put those 5 pieces together, despite the fact that it's not a single biomarker test, we are about 97% accurate in our diagnoses of this disease. And how we know that is confirmation upon autopsy when we can see those hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease.
So Beth, let me ask you, so there's the non-invasive stuff that you talked about, the testing, et cetera, and then there's the invasive stuff. So I want to break this down. You worked at Albany Medical Center, you were part of an ADAC, Alzheimer's Disease Assistance Center, that did this kind of thing.
Right.
So for somebody like me who's not a clinician, that was all garbled, industry talk, and I appreciate that, but I want to break it down because I've had both of my knees done, I've had both of my shoulders done, and then I've had neck fusion. So there's been invasive stuff, but it really wasn't all that bad.
Right.
So let's go back to some of the tests that you talked about, and from for somebody like me who may be taking my mom or my dad to an appointment, what does it actually look like so that the common person can understand?
Yeah, so great question. So typically it will be 2 appointments. And so at the first appointment, the person who is there as well as the family will give us information about the things that they are noticing and observing. And then to your point, we can give people a choice of how they want to pursue that more accurate diagnosis. There are some people, to your point, that are not at all afraid of having that spinal tap. And in fact, in other countries, that is the mode of diagnosis, and it doesn't have the same stigma or fear factor that it does here in the United States. And that's a highly accurate, quick test, and many, many providers are able to do that very successfully without you even knowing they're doing it. So I appreciate you raising that point. For other people, they may have already had the blood work done by their primary care doctor, and they're perfectly fine with having a CAT scan or an MRI. And so we ask them to please get those 2 things done, or we obtain those records if they've already had it done. And then we bring them back and we put the puzzle together with them. So we say, okay, now we have the MRI. There's no stroke, there's no MS, there's no hydrocephalus. So we rule those things out. Now we're going to look at your blood work. There's no Huntington's disease. There's no Pick's disease, and we rule all those things out. So now we're down to just a handful of possible causes. Let's do these paper pencil tests together and hear from your family about what they've observed, and then we will be better poised to make that diagnosis.
No, thank you. And Cathy, look, people know about the Alzheimer's Association. They read in the papers about the memory walks and the fundraising opportunities and the incredible amount of work that the association does to raise funds for research. But that's only a small part of what you guys do. So talk about what types of services and supports that you offer, not only Central New York, but you have chapters that represent the entire state and the entire nation, what those services are, how they can support an individual and a family, and how you can access those types of things.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Yes, we have 75 chapters across the country. So no matter where your viewers are watching today, they can access an Alzheimer's Association chapter closest to them. They can go right to alz.org, type in their zip code and find their closest chapter. You know, we've been an organization, a voluntary health organization that's been around over 40 years now. And our mission is to promote global research so that we can find a cure, the risk reduction so that we can understand ways in which we can identify better this disease and get people the early diagnosis that we talked about, and then also quality dementia care. So what you would find at your local Alzheimer's Association, really, one of the first ways that people connect with us is through our 24/7 helpline. We have an 800 number that we'll be, I know, providing to folks today on our Facebook, that they can reach 24/7. They can talk to a dementia care expert. So those questions are oftentimes around how to get a diagnosis, or maybe they have questions about the changes that they are seeing, how to, perhaps to get resources in their community where their closest expert in addressing Alzheimer's disease maybe, or perhaps a local support group. The Alzheimer's Association has trained volunteers, so they're peer-led support groups, and a number of our support groups are around various topics or focal groups. So we have groups that are for early stage individuals and their caregivers, to individuals that may be supporting not only their spouse or a family member, but maybe are caring for and supporting grandchildren. So they may be providing care that way, and needing to talk about particular issues that pertain to their caregiving. We have a program that can be accessed both on a Zoom feature or on our 24/7 helpline called Care Consultations. And oftentimes people that call our helpline are in need of determining some next steps. So think of it as a care plan of determining what are some action items that I need to be faced with and dealing with over the next couple of months, because it's very difficult oftentimes to determine what should I focus on, what should be my first, second, third priority. And our dementia care experts can really help a family member unravel that and have someone that is a bit removed from the situation to be able to ask those questions. And we can help to put a plan in place that they have some actionable items. So we call those a care plan. And then we have a whole host of education programs